Hi, I'm Addison K. Witt, Poet Laureate of the Defense of Democracy and host of this podcast. The attack on America's public school system isn't slowing down, but neither are we. Here you'll meet authors, educators, students, and defenders from across the country who aren't just sounding the alarm, they're answering it. You'll be informed, you'll be moved, and if we've done our job right, you'll be ready to stand with us. This is the Defense of Democracy podcast. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Defense of Democracy podcast. I'm your host, Addison K. Witt, Poet Laureate of Defense of Democracy. Today, I am joined by Dr. Cathy Fleischer of Everyday Advocacy. Now, she's created a toolkit that is the cornerstone resource for the new Defense of Democracy helpline. And today, we're going to explore how this approach empowers individuals to stand up, speak out, and take meaningful action in their communities. Cathy, welcome to the conversation. It is a pleasure to have you in spite of all of the technical challenges.
Thank you so much for having me on, and Sarah Hostetler, who's my partner in this, that couldn't get the technology to work, so I'm representing her as well.
Well, thank you, and I so much want to have you both on today, but we've been planning for a while. But let's get into it. And before we get into the work, I know that here on this podcast, we talk a lot about advocacy, and oftentimes the proponents are very esteemed people like yourself. But everyone has to start somewhere, and we always speak to those everyday listeners who themselves may want to get involved. Before we get into the work, I'd love to hear your personal journey, what experiences or turns in life first drew you toward advocacy.
So it's been kind of a long journey, and often I tell the story that I really owe it all to my husband, because my husband has been an advocate and organizer in the environmental field for his entire career. And so back in the day when I was a high school teacher and I would come home from school and I would just be frustrated, sad. So much was going on that I felt I couldn't control. I wished people could understand better why I was doing something the way I was doing it. And my husband would always say to me, "Oh, Cathy, you know what you should do?" And he'd start on this whole sort of organizing thing that I should be doing. And I just would look at him and say, "Are you nuts?" Right? I mean, I teach full time. I have 5 preps a day. There is no way I can do this kind of work. And so over the years, as often happens in a long marriage, I learned that he was right. And I learned that there was a lot that advocacy could offer teachers if we could think about it a little bit differently. And so I started doing a deep dive into what this meant. I started interviewing community organizers in the field, in different fields. So people who were in education, people who were in social justice, people who were in housing, people who were in public health, to try to figure out what is it that they did. And then I started thinking about that in terms of teachers. And what I learned really quickly is teachers are natural organizers. Teachers are doing this all the time because they're doing advocacy for their students, because they're talking to their principals, because they're talking to parents. So I learned there were so many connections between what formal advocacy and organizing were to what teachers are doing. And so that really got me excited about thinking about how to do this work and just helping teachers to recognize the natural instincts they have towards advocacy.
That's really interesting because as you were explaining and sharing, I thought so much about being in the trenches and those people that are really in the everyday ins and outs, have a much broader understanding, and oftentimes are the people who can advocate the most or the best.
Right.
I know that many people think advocacy is something reserved for the outspoken or even the bold. What helped you realize that just everyday people can and should use their voices?
So a lot of it was the work I did with teachers and how much I learned alongside other teachers about what they were doing. But it was sort of funny. At the time this was going on, I was working on the first book I wrote about advocacy. And across the street from where we lived, there was this beautiful park, like really hands-on, low-key park that kids use all the time. And there was this decision by the park board that they were going to turn this into what we kept calling was like a Disney World kind of thing, rather than this like natural thing for kids to get dirty and, get the salamanders and do that. It was going to turn into something else. And so a bunch of the neighbors were at this meeting. And when we left the meeting, we all just kind of looked at each other and said, what, is there something that we can do? This doesn't seem right. And so it was just like a bunch of people, a bunch of neighbors who didn't have any experience in politics or any experience in other things. And we got together and started talking to other people and started developing some allies and doing that work. And we got them to turn it around. And that was sort of a real moment for me, because I thought, wow, we could do this. We weren't trained in any of this kind of stuff, but we could do it. And how much better it would be if we could help teachers and librarians and other community people have a little bit of training that would help them do it in smart ways.
How did you, and although Sarah isn't here, I do want to bring her into our conversation. And how did your relationship form, and what brought you together in terms of the work that you're doing?
So Sarah was also working on advocacy from a different kind of stance, and she was looking at it a lot for college level teachers and professors. And we met each other through the National Council of Teachers of English. We started talking together. We started scheming about ways we could do things together. I had done some workshops on everyday advocacy and had taught a course on it when I was at Eastern Michigan University. And Sarah and I just started thinking, wow, what could we do if we did some workshops together? So we started developing like 3-day workshops, 1-day workshops, and we would do them for teachers across the country, oftentimes through the National Writing Project, because they're a fabulous organization that has supported us through a lot of this work. And then we just started bringing in some other people who seemed interested in it too, that we met along the way. So we have a very strong and hearty small group of 7 of us who volunteer our time to do this work.
I'm thinking about so many people I know who are teachers, and I see their comments on Facebook and their struggles and challenges. And it's at times, I have a friend who actually just left her job. She just quit in the middle of it because it can be very stressful between the kids, the parents, the administration, the board, so many moving parts that you have to contend with. For people who think that, for many people, it's difficult to speak up because they are concerned of losing their job or they are afraid. What advice would you give to those teachers?
Yes, I 100% agree. And I always, when I'm talking about, so I want to say, I'm not being Pollyanna-ish, right? I know this is hard work, and I know that people have to find their way in by finding some small thing they can do at first. We talk a lot in everyday advocacy about proactive advocacy. Like, what are the kinds of things you can do before the book bans really start or before the curriculum gets ripped away from you, all those kinds of things. And so here's what we think. The sort of pillars of everyday advocacy are these: working in ways that are smart, safe, savvy, and sustainable. And we think these are really important for people to think about. So working in ways that are smart means that you have to know your issue, right? If the issue you're thinking about is book banning, it really is useful to read like the PEN America reports or the ALA reports to try to see what books are banned and why they're being banned. You also need to think for yourself about those books. Read them yourself so you can have some understanding about it. If you're reading them in a classroom, what your kids are saying about them. So that's what we mean by working in ways that's smart. Get yourself educated on the topic that you care about. Working in ways that are safe means, how do you do this without losing your job? How do you do this without being that teacher that everybody will like, oh no, here she comes when you walk down the hall, right? You don't want to be that either. So when we talk about working in ways that are safe, that has to do with building allies and building awareness. Find some other people, even if it's just 1 or 2 other people who think the way you think, or who don't really know how they think maybe, but you could help them by raising awareness of this. So again, in the book banning thing, to be able to think about who else might be concerned that this might happen in your community, whether that is another teacher, whether that's an administrator, whether that's a parent, whether that's kids. and to try to help build awareness about, hey, did you know that these are the books that are banned? And do you know that this is the reason they're banned? To try to get other people to be sharing with you. Because one of the things we discover is people have so many values that you share, right? But you have to have the courage to just talk to some people and find it out. Okay, so working in ways that are savvy, that's the third one: smart, safe, savvy, and sustainable. So working in ways in savvy, that means learning a few of the strategic things you can do to help make change, which might be having a time when you have parents come in and you just share with them some of the books you're reading, or maybe starting a book club of books that are banned in places and having some teachers and community members join that to talk about them. It has to do with sort of community organizing tactics and community organizing strategies. And so we talk a lot about that in our everyday advocacy work. And the fourth one, the being sustainable, that has to do with how do you make this a part of your everyday life? Because if you're a teacher and it's one more thing, the way I used to think about it, there's no way you're going to do it. You don't have time. You're too busy. So if you can think about one small thing you can do, one of the things we offer is an advocacy calendar. So you can just kind of fill out, like, what am I going to do today? Today might be, I'm going to talk to somebody else in the hall about this. Or it could be, I'm going to ask an administrator to come in and sit in my classroom and see what happens when the kids talk about books that they've read. So it can start in really small ways. And those small ways, especially when you have allies, can build into something bigger. So I get it. I get it that teachers feel like they don't have enough time, that they're scared of losing their jobs, that they feel their voices don't matter. I get all of that. And at the same time, we've seen some success when people try this.
I held that in as long as I could. So, fortunately, what you were saying was very interesting, and it made me think of so many different. What I love so much about what you were saying is that it's not just teacher to teacher or teacher to administrator. You talked about parents, or even getting a student who thinks similarly, and building this sort of coalition of people from different experiences who have shared values.
Right. Exactly.
I love that. You have done, or you have contributed, an extraordinary toolkit to the Defense of Democracy's helpline, one that gives people language, structure, and confidence. Now, a couple of months ago, I was in England and I was filming a TV series, and I was asked to record the opening for the helpline. And as I understand it, the Defense of Democracy helpline exists so that no student, educator, or family facing censorship or intimidation has to stand alone. It connects people to real tools, real advocates, and real protection. It's where fear meets support and where silence ends. At least that's the objective. So, for someone calling the helpline for the first time, what does your toolkit offer them?
So it offers a lot. And I want to add, so everybody knows, it's a free download. We didn't want to make it into something that anybody had to pay for. We wanted people to just be able to download and use it. So the playbook takes you through how to get an advocacy project started, from step one to step whatever. It gives samples of teachers who have created advocacy projects. It gives ideas for how you can make this happen, and it gives you support along the way. We talk about storytelling as advocacy. That's our first core idea about it. And we talk about how you can take your own story and have it shared with other people. So you move from the story of self to the story of us to the story of now. Who needs to hear these stories? What can we do with that? And that comes out of the work of Clifford Gantz, who we have Marshall. It comes from the work of Marshall Gantz, who is somebody that we refer to a lot in this. We also then have a section that talks about naming and framing. Really important to name your issue and to frame it in a way, usually a positive way, that will speak to other people. So we talk about that in this as well. And then the third idea is how to turn it into action. So we take teachers or librarians or people who want to use it through a step-by-step thing. What is your issue that you care about? How can you frame it in several different ways for different audiences? How can you develop allies around that? Who needs to hear it? So it's a very step-by-step thing. And then we also offer some additional things, right? We have samples of some teachers' work throughout the playbook. There's also some videos that have mostly are either me or of teachers in settings where we've shared this. So you can watch a video of somebody else doing it to help you get some ideas how you can do it as well.
I think it's an amazing opportunity and helpline for people. And, although I teach differently, I teach acting, so it's a completely different process, and it's usually private. It's not part of the public school system. But I know a lot of people and have a lot of friends who are in the public school system, and any help that can provide resources for them to uh, become stronger, better advocates in their own space is super, super important. Right now, and we talk about this so much, and I was really curious as I was thinking about this and asking this question to you, because I asked this question to a lot of people in the school system. The attacks on public schools, libraries, educators have been relentless. But from your vantage point, what types of threats are we facing? Are they still, there's been a lot of changes the last election demonstrated that there might be some significant changes moving forward. Are we still seeing the attacks as much as we have in the past?
It feels that way to teachers who are in classrooms right now. It feels that way to me watching, reading perhaps too much of the news and social media. But I think underlying all those attacks, there's one central point, and that's a deprofessionalization of educators and librarians. This idea that their knowledge and experience don't count, that they have no voice. And to me, that is terrifying. Individual books being banned are also really bad, or individual curriculum being taken away. But when what's underlying it is that we don't trust teachers to make the decisions, it's a stunning statement on what's going on in the world. I think there's many areas in which we're not trusting the professionals to make the decisions. So I think so much of what's going on is based in that. I think that is why it makes it even more important for teachers to reclaim their voices and to find ways to do it that are smart, safe, savvy, and sustainable. Because together we have power, and together we can talk back and help others understand why we do things in the way we do, that are research-based, that are based in the context in which we work, that are based in the students that we see. We have to do that. It's the kids who are going to suffer if we don't.
Indeed. I so love together we have power. I've always been a we the people kind of a person, and I think it is fundamental in everything that we do. Together we have power. How do we help individuals feel empowered when the system around them feels overwhelming?
So I go back to, I think, small steps. Because one of the things I learned really early on in community organizing when I was starting to study it, is every small step you take makes you feel more confident about taking the next step, right? When you have something and there's a little success and maybe one other person is listening to you, it's easier to go on. So to not think like, we're going to get rid of all banned books in the United States tomorrow, right? We're going to get rid of that whole banning thing. That's not going to work. So when you can think about what small step you can take in your community. And I wanted to share a story of a small step that a teacher I worked with took that I think is really cool.
Please.
So yeah, her name, a different Sarah. This teacher's name is Sarah Andrew Vaughn. And she had a class of ninth graders. And instead of the sort of traditional parent night where they come in and you hand out the curriculum and you say all the punishments that are going to happen if kids don't get things in on time and blah, 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 she asked the parents to come to a meeting in which she started by asking them to take a minute and write about a memorable experience with reading and then a memorable experience with writing. And the parents wrote for a while. And then she asked people if they felt comfortable to start sharing them. And they shared all kinds of things. They shared memories of school. Oh, I hated it when there was red pen all over my paper. I loved it when I could just sit in my bed and just read till really late at night and no one bothered me and I could just read a book I cared about. They talked about how when writing really mattered. So when they were writing a eulogy for a relative, or when they were writing a letter to the editor, how when it mattered, how much they cared about it, and how many revisions they did, and how they really tried to make it so powerful. And so when they got done sharing, Sarah identified some of the things that they had said and then said, that's what I'm trying to do in my classroom. And it was such a wonderful moment because what I had the honor of being there and watching this happen. It was such a wonderful moment because it wasn't her top down saying, I'm using writing workshop, I'm using reading workshop, I'm doing this. She instead brought them along. So they were the ones who were saying that, right? So she had this group of parents like eating out of the palm of her hand, right? Because they saw, because of their values, which led from their experiences, how important it was to have freedom to read and write.
I love that. I know that we're short on time, but I also wanted to ask for someone who is listening today who wants to advocate but doesn't know where to start. What's the first step, and how can our listeners use your toolkit immediately? And are there any practices or routines they can adopt?
100%. Absolutely. So I'd say a few things. We have a everyday advocacy website, everydayadvocacy.org, that has all kinds of information about the work that we do. And it also has teacher stories for success stories that teachers have gone through, whether it's advocacy around banned books or other kinds of things. So you can go read the stories of other people and I think get inspired by that. You can also download the playbook right from our website, and that will just literally take you through a step-by-step kind of thing about how you can do everyday advocacy. The third resource I want to mention, which is I think really fun, we have a YouTube station, YouTube channel, I guess, Everyday Advocacy YouTube. And on that, we have both this same collection of teacher stories, but we also have these amazing author stories in which we asked authors to just record a 3 to 5 minute recording of a time in which they realized that one of their books made a difference in the life of a young person. You notice how we frame that. It wasn't tell us an awful experience about being banned. It's about tell us about an experience when you learned that it made a difference in the life of a young person. And we have some amazing authors who've told some really great stories. So we love those. We think that those are a really cool thing for anybody to listen to. But if you're trying to do something in your classroom or with a group of people, to be able to ask them to share a story, right, of when a book made a difference in your life, as Sarah did with the parents in her curriculum night, but then also play some of these author stories and try to see where are their parallels, where are the values shared, what are the things we really can know about books and why books are important.
It's so important to remember education is fundamental to our society, to a healthy democracy, and how much the methods and the approaches to education and the way we educate evolve over time. And to have you finding ways you and Sarah and others finding ways to help people evolve, because it is very stressful, it's very challenging. You have so many factions coming at you, or you feel that they're coming at you,
Right.
that it's really, really challenging. Is there any final thing you'd like to add before we close?
I just want to say to the teachers and the librarians and all the other people who are concerned about this, I feel you. I have sleepless nights, right? Because I worry so much about what's going on. And this is our small thing that might be able to help you guys as you're trying to make change, get your voices heard, and remember that teachers are so important. They're like the pillar of society that help create a new generation all the time, new generations of people who are thinking, who are critical thinkers, who are proud to have their voices raised too. So the work that teachers do is a miracle, and any way we can support it, we want to.
Cathy, thank you so much for joining me today and having this conversation. I believe it's a conversation of hope and strategy and some grounded guidance that you have brought and you bring to the work. To our listeners, the Defense of Democracy Helpline exists because of people like Cathy and Sarah. Although she's not here with us today, we miss her, but they do help to empower those on the front lines. If you believe in supporting public schools, protecting educators, and defending our democracy, we invite you to get involved. Your voice matters, your advocacy matters, and your contribution, whether time, energy, or a year-end donation, truly keeps this work alive. Thank you for listening. I'm Addison K. Witt. This is the Defense of Democracy podcast.
Defense of Democracy is the only national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting our schools and libraries from attacks by anti-government extremist organizations like Moms for Liberty. We count on listeners like you to support our work. If you would like to make a tax-deductible donation to Defense of Democracy, please visit defenseofdemocracy.org and click support. 100% of your contribution helps our work, including the production of this podcast. If you are a business and would like to learn about corporate sponsorships of the podcast, which start at $250 per month, please contact info@defenseofdemocracy.org.